Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. All right, guys, another One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute video. As always, you know the thing. You can buy your physical copies of the 2025 Practical Distillers and Alchemist Almanac over at thealchemistcabinet.com in the warehouse, or you can go check out oldhomesteaddc.com for all the Old Homestead Distillery updates, or you can check out the If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything podcast, wherever you get your podcast, and share that thing and help me out big time. But as always, send me your questions, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, and or the YouTube comments below, and or social media, and I'll try to get to them and answer them to the best of my ability. You guys have been sending in some real bangers of questions, and some of them get really, really detailed. And so this is a longer email, and I've read through it once. I'm going to read through it on here, and I may answer questions as I go, or I may answer them all at the end. I don't know. Sometimes with these long emails, and sometimes you guys are asking questions that I don't necessarily always know the answer to, so I have to do some thinking on them. So let's see what we got here. This is from man, I don't even know if I can. I think it's Pal. I hope I got that right, man. I apologize if not, but here we go. So hi, Alan. My ride as a home distiller hit a big bump on the road a couple of weeks ago when I scorched the internal electric heating element in a stripping run and ruined a perfectly good batch of high rye bourbon wash. Since I am still not certain what actually caused the scorching, I wanted to hear your thoughts about it. I'm trying to take up corrective actions, but am I fixing what was broken? So before we go any further in the email, I also want to let you guys know, so I have very, very limited experience with elements in the still. I have a lot of experience with elements in jackets, but very little with elements in still. Tyler Richardson, my still hand, has done a lot more of that. We do have a 100-gallon still that does have elements in still, so I'm about to start playing around with that here before too long over at Old Homestead, but I just want to preface this with that information. So my first bourbon project was a high wheat bourbon. It went really well, so I felt I had wind in my sails. Initially, my mashes had poor efficiency as low as 64%, but I worked with it and improved it for each mash. In the end, I was up at 75% efficiency. Nice. Which is where I usually am when brewing beer. I didn't use alpha amylase, but I did use glucoamylase in the cool down phase, and my ferments have always fermented down to 1.000. Obviously, my washes would have had a fair amount of unconverted starch in them, but nothing that impacted my distilling. I ran stripping runs at full blast, no trouble. For your information, I ferment and distill off the grain, and I'm super careful about not transferring yeast trub and stuff from the fermenter to the boiler. My second project is a high rye bourbon, and this is where problems arrived. I followed exactly the same process as with the wheated bourbon, my mash efficiency continuing to improve and fermenting all that could be fermented. But my first stripping run was a disaster. As the run progressed running at full blast, I started noticing a spicy, acrid smell. Then there were tiny puffs of air coming out of the spout. I should have pulled the plug there, obviously, but unfortunately I've got one of those carry-on-through mentalities. I understand that completely. So I continued. The smell just got worse and worse, and finally I called it quits. The low wines were totally contaminated by the acrid smell and taste, and the element covered in black crystallized soot. That sucks, man. I cleaned up everything apart from some scorch marks on the inside of the element, and I ran a second stripping run, same recipe, super slow, like a slow spirit run. No scorching this time, but as the run progressed, the acrid smell came back. Half of the low wines were contaminated by the acrid smell and taste. Not sure if the smell came from the remaining residue on the element or if it's from the wash. After distillation, though, nothing smells foul inside the boiler. The wash smells like ethanol spent wash. The element is not a stinker the second time. It's weird. What caused this to happen? 1, unconverted starch can't be unfermented sugar since I ferment clean. Or 2, proteins have more unconverted starch than the rye. Considering my mashing was less efficient then, I think it cut part of the email off. I do apologize. My last rye bourbon mash had an efficiency of 84%, 20% higher efficiency than my first wheat bourbon mash, which is strange. It definitely, it was higher efficiency. That you shouldn't have that problem. Could it be the proteins in suspension? Rye has a lot of it, and even though my wash is clean from solids, the consistency of the wash is cloudy and hazy, much more cloudy than the wheat mash. What do you think caused this to happen, and what corrective actions would you recommend? I would say the protein issue could definitely be the problem, especially if your wash was still cloudy. So a couple of things you might consider is maybe a yeast that flocculates really easily, falls to the bottom easily. Might help clean that up. I also wouldn't be opposed to trying to get that wash to clear in any way that you can, either maybe even using some isinglass or some gelatin or something like that, like you would in winemaking. If not, even chilling that wash down in order to cause those things to fall out of suspension. Whatever that cloudiness that is in that wash for that high rye bourbon is definitely what I would say you scorched onto your element, without a doubt. It could potentially be the proteins. I guess the question would be, other things that are high protein, do you have problems with those? So different malts and things of that nature. Yeah, I wish I knew more about running elements in the still and I could help you a little further, but I suspect that you're on the right track. That cloudiness that's in your wash is what has caused this scorching issue, that it's definitely rye related, and the issue would be if you're going to do rye like that, you need to find a really good way to clear your wash before you ever run it on those elements. I suspect that will solve your issue. The bad thing is once you scorch something like that, as we talked about on the channel before, there's just really no great way to save it. If it's a light scorch, you can use the old rectifiers trick and you could run it through some charcoal or run it through some activated carbon and then redistill on some charcoal. A lot of times that will clean it up, especially if you go to a higher proof, do a little bit of rectification. But man, and once you smelled a scorched mash too, and this, like, it's just one of those things that it's like smelling a dead animal. It just sets in there. You think about it for a second and your memory bank immediately takes you to that, exactly what that smell is. Exactly what it is, and it's always disappointing and it always sucks. And take it from somebody who scorched a hell of a lot of whiskey at home over the years. Yeah, it sucks, but yeah, that would be my guess, is that it's the proteins, and you definitely need to clear that wash as well as possible. Maybe even use some kind of agent to clear that wash. I don't imagine that the scorching smell that you got came off of that element on the second run. Specifically because I have scorched some stainless steel stills in the past. I famously scorched the submarine pot from Wayne Herbert at Ozark Steelworks multiple times, trying to figure out the air agitation for stirring and all that stuff. And I've never had that. There's always a little bit of a burn mark on the bottom of that still now, and I never had that transfer to future distillation, so I can't imagine it would do it on elements either. But I could be wrong. I don't know. But anyways, sorry I couldn't be of more help than that, but hopefully that gives you some idea anyways, or at least confirms your theories. And as you play around with that, if you play around with it some more, let us know how it turns out. But yeah, definitely clear that wash and let's see what happens. All right, guys, have a good one. Later.